Hey guys, tonight you find yourself before dawn on a narrow road curling through winter fields toward a convent hidden behind black trees. Cold reaches through your cloak as if wool were merely a polite suggestion, and every breath leaves a pale cloud beside the steaming noses of tired horses. Mud grips your boots, river mist hangs over the ditch. Somewhere ahead, a bell sounds, slow and hollow, carrying through darkness with the patient certainty of stone. You smell damp straw from a cart, smoke caught beneath distant rafters, and the faint sweetness of torch wax near a gate you cannot yet see. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, especially once you discovered that the nearest warm bath is less a service than a theological rumour. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bell sounds again as you round the ridge, and the convent appears beneath the paling sky. Its wall is lower than a castle's, but no less serious, built from rough stone darkened by rain. An oak gate sits beneath a shallow arch banded with iron. Above it, a weathered image of the Virgin watches the road. You approach beside an old woman carrying onions in a wicker basket, and a man leading a mule that seems deeply offended by winter. Both hope for shelter in the convent guest house. You pull the rope beside the gate. A small bell rattles inside. At last, a viewing hatch opens. One eye studies you. You give your names and explain that the road is soaked and the river crossing poor. The hatch closes. Iron bolts scrape. The gate opens just wide enough to admit you. Inside, the courtyard smells of wet stone, boiled oats, wood smoke, and sharp herbs from the infirmary garden. Chickens scratch beneath a lean-to. A lay sister crosses with a wooden bucket while another carries logs toward the kitchen. The sisters are already drawing water, sweeping rushes, tending the bakehouse, and checking winter stores of barley, peas, and wrinkling apples. Prayer may order the day here, but prayer does not carry firewood. No one can quite agree whether convent life is quieter than village life. The walls muffle carts and market shouting, yet every hinge, spoon, cough, bell, and footstep seems unusually clear. Near the cloister walk, you first notice Sister Eleanor. She stands beside a chest while another sister counts folded linen. Her veil is pinned neatly. Her hands are pale from cold. At her girdle hangs a rosary and a tiny pewter image of Saint Catherine, sometimes invoked by young women in difficult circumstances. Some swear that carrying such a token close to the body strengthens resolve. Whether Eleanor believes that is difficult to tell. She looks toward the gate. Only once. Then, after a breath, she looks again. The portress notices too. Nothing is said. You are led into the guest house, where dried rushes cover the stone floor and a small hearth offers more smoke than warmth. A novice brings pottage and coarse bread whose crust could probably negotiate its own market toll. You eat anyway, warming your fingers around the wooden bowl while rain whispers against the shutters. Beyond the wall, the convent keeps its rhythm. Bells mark the hours. An ink-stained scribe bends over parchment near the chapel. Smoked fish hangs beneath soot-black rafters in the kitchen. Near the infirmary, feverfew, sage, and rosemary dry from pegs. Rosemary, you're told, may sharpen memory, and tucked beneath a pillow, discourage troublesome dreams. Medieval remedies are generous that way. One herb is often expected to perform the duties of 3 professions: By mid-morning, you help carry a bucket toward the kitchen, partly from gratitude and partly because usefulness improves the odds of supper. That is when hoofbeats sound beyond the wall. One horse. Sister Eleanor is crossing the yard with folded cloth in her arms. She stops. Only long enough that you notice. Through a narrow gap near the gate, you catch a glimpse of a dark cloak, a leather document case, and the pale flash of a bridle. Eleanor continues walking. Later, beside the woodpile, two lay sisters murmur about a travelling clerk who's passed the convent several times on business between a nearby manor and the bishop's town. He carries letters, accounts, and sealed instructions for men who prefer other people to endure the mud. One sister calls him courteous. The other says courtesy is easy when a man is leaving before supper. You keep your face toward the bucket. No one mentions Eleanor directly, but the silence around her name feels deliberate. Toward evening, beeswax candles glow behind the chapel windows, little amber squares against the rain. The sisters gather as another bell calls them inward. You stand beneath the guest house eaves and watch wet wool cloaks disappear beneath the cloister arches. Eleanor is last. For a moment she pauses beside the wall, listening. Beyond it, faint through rain, a horse exhales. Then comes the soft creak of saddle leather. You cannot see the rider, but Eleanor knows the sound. Her fingers close around the pewter saint at her girdle. Then the bell calls again, and she turns toward prayer. Those who tell the tale never fully agree when her trouble truly begins. Perhaps it begins much earlier. Perhaps it begins here. The rain does not stop when darkness settles over the convent. It softens instead, becoming a steady tapping against the shutters of the guest house while the courtyard beyond turns black and glossy beneath the moonless sky. From your pallet near the hearth, you hear doors closing one by one, iron latches dropping into place, and the distant murmur of the sisters completing their final prayers. The little fire has burned low enough that the room smells mostly of ash, damp wool, and the sour trace of yesterday's rushes beneath the newer layer scattered over the floor. You might expect everyone behind convent walls to sleep with a peaceful certainty of saints carved above church doors. The person moving quietly along the covered cloister suggests otherwise. You first hear soft footsteps, then nothing, then another step. You lift your head from the wool blanket and listen. A faint glow slides across the narrow guest-house window. Someone carries a candle along the passage outside, shielding the flame with one hand. The figure passes slowly enough for you to recognize Sister Eleanor beneath her dark veil. She is not heading toward the chapel. She disappears instead toward the small room where devotional books and copied texts are kept for the sisters' use. By morning, you almost convince yourself that the incident means nothing. Convents do not cease functioning merely because the sun goes down. A sick sister might need herbs, a candle might need replacing, a book might be fetched for prayer. And yet, after the first bell before dawn, when you shuffle into the courtyard with cold hands tucked beneath your sleeves, you see Eleanor again. She carries a psalter pressed tightly against her chest. The book is not grand. Its leather cover is rubbed smooth at the corners, and one clasp has been repaired with a thin strip of cord. Inside are prayers, psalms, and a few painted initials brightened with red and blue pigment. Books like this are valuable enough to be guarded carefully, though years of use have left grease-darkened marks where countless fingers have turned the pages. At breakfast, Eleanor eats almost nothing. The sisters take coarse bread and warm pottage in near silence while a reader recites from a religious text. Wooden spoons scrape gently against bowls. Somewhere near the kitchen wall, a mouse tests the limits of monastic hospitality. Eleanor keeps one hand near the psalter. Later, while helping a lay sister carry folded linen to a storage chest, you pass the cloister bench where Eleanor has been sitting. She rises too quickly. The psalter slips. It strikes the stone. A small folded square of parchment slides from between the pages. For one suspended moment, neither of you moves. The parchment is narrow, folded twice and tied with pale thread. Eleanor reaches it before you do. Her face remains calm, but colour rises beneath her cheeks. You saw nothing, her expression seems to say, though no words leave her mouth. You continue walking, in a place where silence is cultivated as a virtue. Silence also proves wonderfully useful for hiding things. No one can quite agree whether medieval convents were as sealed from the wider world as later stories make them seem. Many receive messengers, merchants, priests, relatives, tenants, pilgrims, labourers, and officials. News enters through gates almost as easily as flour sacks and barrels of ale. Letters do too. By midday, you begin to understand how one might have reached Eleanor. A clerk arrives with documents for the prioress concerning rents from convent lands. His cloak is wet at the hem. His boots are thick with mud. Slung beneath one arm is the same leather document case you glimpsed beyond the gate the day before. You do not need anyone to tell you who he is. His name, you learn from the porteress, is Martin. He waits beneath the covered passage while a servant brings him weak ale. He is perhaps 30, clean-shaven, with careful hands and ink staining the side of one finger. A clerk's hands are rarely clean for long. Parchment, sealing wax, quills, and account rolls leave their own marks just as surely as ploughs mark farmers. Eleanor does not come near him. That absence attracts more attention than an appearance might have. She works in the kitchen instead, chopping leeks for evening pottage while steam clouds the rafters. Her knife rises and falls with unnecessary concentration. A sister beside her talks about the feast day of St. Agnes, and an old custom in which unmarried girls sometimes seek signs in dreams concerning future husbands. Some swear that fasting, prayer, or certain herbs beneath the pillow might encourage such dreams. The older cook snorts and says a heavy supper produces visions just as effectively. You hide a smile in your cup. Eleanor does not smile. Her mind is elsewhere. That afternoon, the rain finally clears. Thin sunlight touches the cloister stones, and water drips steadily from the roof tiles. You see Eleanor seated alone near a narrow window, the psalter open before her. She turns several pages, stops, checks the corridor, then unfolds the hidden parchment. You cannot read the words from where you stand, and you make no attempt to move closer. Still, you see her eyes follow the lines. Slowly. Once. Then again. Her thumb rests against one sentence for a long while. Whatever Martin has written, it is not an account of barley rents. The convent bell sounds. Eleanor folds the parchment quickly, but instead of returning it immediately to the book, she presses it between both palms. Even now, it is hard to tell whether what binds her to Martin is already love, or whether it remains something quieter and more dangerous because it has not yet been given a name. Perhaps affection grows here as moss grows between the cloister stones slowly, unnoticed, nourished by tiny amounts of rain. You watch Eleanor tuck the letter once more between the psalter's pages. Then she closes the leather cover. Across the courtyard, Martin mounts his horse. He never looks toward her window. Eleanor never waves. Yet when the gate closes behind him, her fingers remain resting on the hidden letter. And during evening prayer, when every voice should rise together, Hers enters one line too late. The next morning arrives beneath a pale sky the colour of old linen. Frost silvering the courtyard stones cracks softly beneath your boots as you carry a basket of kindling toward the kitchen. The convent is already awake. Bells have sounded before sunrise. Bread dough has been set near the warmest wall, and a lay sister is scolding a stubborn fire with the resigned patience of someone who knows that flames, like bishops and mules, respond poorly to argument. Across the yard, Sister Eleanor walks toward the infirmary. She carries a small wicker tray holding strips of linen, a jar of honey, and bundles of dried sage. You follow at a distance because you have been asked to bring firewood to the infirmary hearth, and because the world has arranged matters so conveniently that minding your own business has become surprisingly difficult. The herb garden lies behind a low stone wall where rosemary, rue, sage, feverfew, and winter savoury survive beneath straw coverings. Most beds look dead beneath the frost, but the infirmarian knows where life still sleeps under the soil. She has you stack logs beside the hearth while Eleanor grinds herbs in a stone mortar. The room smells of rosemary, smoke, vinegar, and old wool. A sick sister rests beneath blankets nearby, her forehead wrapped in linen. On a shelf stand, pottery jars marked with simple symbols. Dried roots hang from ceiling beams beside a little bunch of vervain tied with red thread. Some swear that vervain protects against wicked influence, fever, and troublesome spirits, though whether it can protect a nun from her own thoughts is another matter entirely. No one can quite agree whether medieval remedies work because of herbs, prayer, habit, hope, or simply because lying down somewhere warm is occasionally the finest medicine available. Eleanor crushes rosemary until its sharp scent fills the room. Then the convent dog appears. He's a rough-coated brown creature with one torn ear and the solemn expression of a minor church official reviewing questionable expenses. No one seems certain who owns him. He sleeps near the kitchen when hungry, near the gate when curious, and beneath the infirmary wall whenever sunshine finds the stones. Today he follows Eleanor. She nudges him gently away with her foot. He sits down. She moves 3 paces. He moves 3 paces. This continues until even the infirmarian gives him a suspicious look. By late morning, you accompany Eleanor outside to gather rosemary tips from the sheltered side of the garden wall. The sun has climbed enough to soften the frost, and drops of water shine along the bare branches overhead. The convent feels almost peaceful. Almost. Beyond the outer wall comes the muted sound of a horse. Eleanor's hand freezes above the rosemary. The dog's ears lift. You hear a gate hinge, low voices, then footsteps crossing the outer yard. Martin has returned. Not to see Eleanor, officially. He carries a packet of documents for the steward concerning a dispute over a tenant's rent and 2 sacks of oats. This is apparently important enough to require parchment, seals, witnesses, and enough solemnity to suggest that the oats themselves may soon be excommunicated. Eleanor keeps gathering herbs. She does not look toward the passage. Several minutes pass. Then the infirmarian sends you both to fetch clean water from the covered cistern near the rear wall. That route passes the herb garden again. Martin is there. He stands beneath an arch beside a wooden bench, waiting for the steward. His dark cloak is folded over one arm. Without it, he looks less like a mysterious traveller and more like what he truly is, a tired clerk with damp boots, an ink mark on his thumb, and a thread coming loose at one cuff. Eleanor stops. So do you. Martin bows. She lowers her eyes. Nothing remarkable happens. No grand declaration. No hand reaches dramatically through torchlight. They speak first about the weather. This seems disappointing until you remember that people who are forbidden to speak freely often become extremely interested in rain. Martin asks whether the infirmary roof still leaks. Eleanor says it does, near the eastern corner. He mentions that the river road is almost passable again. She says the convent storehouse lost 2 jars of apples to mould. You stand beside the cistern holding a wooden bucket while witnessing perhaps the least efficient courtship in Christendom. Yet beneath their ordinary words something passes. You can hear it in the pauses. Martin asks if she received what he sent. Eleanor's fingers tighten around the bucket handle. She says yes. Only that. The dog pushes through the herb beds and sits directly between them. Martin looks down. Eleanor almost laughs. It is the first time you see her face soften completely. For a moment she is not a figure beneath a veil, not a woman measured by bells, vows, duties, and stone walls. She's simply someone amused by an inconvenient dog. Martin smiles too. Then footsteps sound beneath the cloister arcade. Their faces change at once. Eleanor lifts the bucket. Martin steps back toward the bench. You walk on. That afternoon, the two of them meet once more, though only for moments. You are helping shake damp rushes from a sack when Eleanor carries used linen toward the wash-house. Martin crosses the yard toward the gate. Their paths meet beside the infirmary wall, where rosemary spills over the stone. He slips something into her hand. Not a letter. A small sprig of dried lavender bound with blue thread. Lavender is used for scent, for linens, sometimes for headaches, and in some households as a token of a devotion. Whether Martin intends any of those meanings, you cannot know. Eleanor closes her fingers around it. Those who tell the tale never fully agree when affection becomes love. Perhaps there is no single moment. Perhaps it happens through tiny repetitions, a remembered road, a hidden letter, a question about a leaking roof, a sprig of lavender passed beside frozen rosemary. When evening bells begin, Martin is already gone. Eleanor returns to the chapel with the others. The dog follows her as far as the door, then lies down outside. Later, you find a faint lavender scent lingering in the cloister. And when Eleanor passes you beneath the candlelight, one small blue thread is just visible where it disappears beneath her sleeve. By the end of the week, the weather turns colder. A north wind presses against the convent walls, finding cracks between stones and slipping beneath doors with the persistence of a tax collector. The courtyard trough freezes overnight. Thin ice forms inside forgotten buckets. In the guest house, you wake with your nose cold despite 2 wool blankets, and the hearth must be coaxed back to life from a bed of grey embers before anyone can pretend the morning is civilized. The sisters begin their day as always. Bells call them from darkness. Wooden patterns knock over stone. A lay sister lights lamps in the chapel. Another carries a basket of yesterday's bread toward the kitchen, where stale slices will be softened into warm broth, because medieval kitchens dislike waste almost as much as abbesses dislike disorder. You notice Sister Eleanor entering the chapel late, only by a few breaths, but the abbess notices too. Mother Beatrice sits near the front beneath a plain wool mantle lined with rabbit fur. She's not an old woman, though the convent has given her the calm expression of someone who has spent years listening to excuses involving weather, illness, broken jars, wandering livestock, missing keys, and saints who apparently receive blame for nearly everything. Eleanor slips into her place. Prayer continues. When the sisters reach a familiar response, Eleanor remains silent, half a heartbeat too long. Then she joins. Mother Beatrice does not turn her head. She does not need to. Afterward, Eleanor leaves with the others and helps carry flour from the storehouse. You watch her lift one end of a sack while a lay sister takes the other. Flour dust settles across their sleeves. Nearby, dried peas fill a wooden bin. Salted fish hangs in rows, and strings of onions sway gently from roof beams. Winter storehouses are guarded with serious attention. A convent that misjudges its grain in November may discover that spiritual devotion does very little to improve an empty pot in February. Mother Beatrice appears in the doorway. She asks the cellarer whether the grain accounts are complete. She asks whether the smoked fish has been checked for damp. Then her gaze rests on Eleanor. Only briefly. You have begun to understand that this is how suspicion moves through a convent. It does not gallop. It walks. Later, while carrying split logs along the cloister, you pass a small recess near the book room. A candle sits there. Half burned. Nothing unusual in that, except that it should have been extinguished the night before. The wax has run unevenly down one side. A blackened wick leans toward the wall. Beside the candle lies a tiny scrap of pale blue thread, the same colour as the thread around Martin's lavender. You see it. So does the sacristan. She picks it up between two fingers. Her mouth tightens. The convent possesses strict habits concerning fire. Candles are costly, and an unattended flame among parchment, dry rushes, wool hangings, and wooden beams is less a devotional object than an invitation to disaster. Some swear that a candle guttering without wind may warn of death, betrayal, or the unseen presence of a spirit. Others insist it usually means poor wax or a crooked wick. The sacristan appears to prefer the practical explanation. Until she asks who entered the book room after Compline, no one answers. No one can quite agree whether Mother Beatrice hears of the candle that same morning or later in the day. But by noon, another small irregularity appears. The portress cannot find the outer passage key where it normally hangs. It is a heavy iron key nearly the length of your hand, kept on a ring beside three smaller ones. The ring is there. The large key is not. For perhaps 10 minutes, the convent develops the quiet panic usually reserved for missing relics or missing cheese. Cupboards are checked. Aprons are searched. A novice peers beneath a bench, as though an iron key might have crawled under it for warmth. Then the portress finds it. It lies on a shelf beside the linen chest. She stares at it. She remembers hanging it beside the gate. She is certain, or almost certain. Memory becomes strangely delicate when authority begins asking questions. Mother Beatrice listens while the portress explains. Eleanor stands nearby with folded linens in her arms. Her face remains still. Yet when distant hoofbeats sound outside the wall, she looks toward the gate. Mother Beatrice sees that too. The abbess says nothing. The rider is only a merchant passing toward the village. But Eleanor's attention follows the sound until it fades. That evening, you help bring benches nearer the guest-house hearth. The rough-coated dog sleeps beside the door, twitching in some private dream. Wet cloaks steam on wooden pegs. A traveller from the north tells you that fox fat rubbed into leather keeps boots supple through winter. The hostler says beeswax works better. The traveller insists fox fat protects against frostbite as well. You look at his cracked boots and decide not to ask for supporting evidence. Outside, darkness settles early. The convent bells ring for Compline. You see Eleanor crossing the cloister. Mother Beatrice waits beneath the arch. Eleanor slows. The abbess asks whether she has been sleeping poorly. Eleanor says she has. Mother Beatrice asks whether anything troubles her conscience. For the first time Eleanor hesitates, only slightly. She says no. The abbess studies her face. Then she reaches out and straightens the edge of Eleanor's veil with surprising gentleness. Very well, her silence seems to answer, but she does not look convinced. That night, long after the candles are extinguished, you hear footsteps in the corridor again. This time another door opens. A different set of footsteps follows. Somewhere in the darkness, an iron key turns softly in a lock, and you understand that Mother Beatrice has begun watching. Morning comes slowly, grey and brittle, and the convent seems to wake beneath a layer of frost. You hear the first bell before you see any light. It rolls through the stone passages, deep and measured, calling the sisters from sleep while your own breath gathers faintly above the guest-house blanket. Somewhere nearby, a door groans open. Someone coughs. A wooden bucket knocks against a wall. The rough-coated dog scratches once at the threshold, turns in a circle, and decides that religious discipline is no reason to abandon a warm patch of floor. By the time you cross the courtyard, Sister Eleanor is already waiting outside the abbess's chamber. She stands beneath a narrow window with her hands folded inside her sleeves. Mother Beatrice has sent for her. No one says why. No one needs to. The missing key has returned to its hook. The half-burned candle has been removed. The scrap of blue thread is gone. Nothing remains that might be called proof. But convents are built upon observation as much as stone. The door opens. Eleanor enters. After a moment, Mother Beatrice notices you nearby carrying a basket of kindling toward the warming room. She asks you to place it beside the hearth, and so, by the peculiar generosity of medieval architecture, you find yourself close enough to hear most of what follows through a door that does not quite shut. The abbess does not begin with accusation. She begins with vows. Eleanor has promised obedience, chastity, and stability within religious life. The precise forms differ from house to house, and no one can quite agree how every medieval woman understands those promises when she first makes them. Some enter young, some enter after widowhood, some are offered by families, some seek devotion willingly, some discover peace behind the walls. Others discover that a promise made years ago can feel very different once life begins asking new questions. Mother Beatrice reminds Eleanor that solemn vows are not merely private words spoken between one woman and God. They have consequences. Property may have been transferred. Dowry arrangements may have been made. Family expectations may rest upon them. The convent itself may have accepted responsibility for feeding, clothing, housing, and protecting her for life. Leaving is therefore not as simple as opening a gate and deciding that the road looks pleasant. The road, as you already know, rarely looks pleasant anyway. Eleanor remains silent for a long while. Then she asks what would happen if a sister could no longer keep her vow. Mother Beatrice answers carefully. There are procedures. Permission may be sought. A bishop or another church authority may need to hear the case. Circumstances matter. Whether vows were freely taken may matter. Whether they were solemn and properly received certainly matters. Dispensation is possible in some situations, but rare enough that no sensible person should build a peaceful future upon expecting it. Eleanor asks whether love changes anything. The abbess's chair creaks. For several breaths, only the fire speaks. Then Mother Beatrice says that love may change the heart, but it does not automatically change the law. That sentence seems to settle heavily into the room. You continue stacking kindling much more slowly than necessary. Outside, the convent moves through its morning tasks. Someone beats dust from a wool blanket. A lay sister carries cabbage toward the kitchen. The smell of oat pottage drifts in with a ribbon of smoke. Life keeps moving while Eleanor's future grows suddenly narrow. Mother Beatrice explains that if Eleanor were simply to leave without permission, people might call her apostate from her religious life. The word sounds harsh in the quiet chamber. It may bring scandal. Her family could reject her. A priest might refuse to treat any attempted marriage as lawful while her vows remain binding. The man she loves could find himself dragged into the dispute as well. There may be demands that she return. There may be penance. There may be years of uncertainty. Some swear that runaway religious women were always hunted down immediately, but the truth appears less tidy. Distance, local authorities, family influence, money, and sheer human confusion could all alter what happened. Even now, it is hard to tell whether every such case ended according to written rules. Medieval rules have an unfortunate habit of looking much neater on parchment than they do on muddy roads. Eleanor asks another question. What belongs to her if she goes? Mother Beatrice answers even more gently. Perhaps very little. The clothing issued to her belongs to the house. Books certainly belong to the house. Money may be restricted. Property placed with a convent may no longer be hers to reclaim simply because desire has changed direction. Even the wool cloak on her shoulders cannot automatically be carried away as though she were departing an inn. This seems to disturb Eleanor more than the legal language. Not because she covets possessions, because suddenly leaving has shape. No bed, no regular meals, no sisters beside her at prayer. No guaranteed roof, no storehouse filled with peas, flour, salted fish, and apples. No familiar bell telling her when to wake, work, eat, pray, and sleep. Freedom, you realize, is frightening partly because it arrives without a timetable. Mother Beatrice rises and crosses to a small shelf. There rests a reliquary no larger than a drinking cup, said to hold a fragment of cloth associated with a local saint. Some sisters trust it deeply. Others, especially the older ones, have privately suggested that it resembles ordinary linen with an unusually ambitious biography. Mother Beatrice places her fingers against the little silver box. She does not command Eleanor to swear before it. Instead, she asks only one thing. Does she wish to leave the convent because of Martin? Eleanor looks toward the window. For several heartbeats, you hear nothing. Then she says yes. Not loudly, not dramatically, just yes. Mother Beatrice closes her eyes. When she opens them again, there is sadness there rather than anger. She tells Eleanor that wanting is not the same as being free to act. She tells her not to leave the grounds. She tells her not to communicate privately with Martin. And she tells her that, for now, the matter will remain between them. Eleanor bows. As she turns toward the door, her face is pale. She passes you without speaking. At her wrist, beneath the edge of her sleeve, you glimpse the faded blue thread. By evening, the convent bells sound exactly as they did yesterday. But now you understand that every toll is measuring something Eleanor can no longer ignore. 2 days later, the road beyond the convent is hard with frost. You leave after prime with a lay brother and one of the older women from the guest house, sent toward the nearby town for lamp oil, salt, and a small bundle of needles that the convent seamstress insists are becoming impossible to find in decent quality. The gate closes behind you with its usual scrape of iron, and for the first time since Mother Beatrice's conversation with Eleanor, the convent wall lies at your back rather than around you. The freedom feels immediate. So does the wind. It cuts across the fields and pushes beneath your hood, while frozen mud cracks beneath your boots. Bare hedges line the track. A roadside shrine stands beneath an elm, its little carved saint whitened by frost and decorated with 2 faded ribbons left by travellers. Someone has placed a bent horseshoe beside it. The lay brother tells you that iron is sometimes carried against misfortune, though whether the saint appreciates sharing devotional space with old folk custom is apparently not a question anyone has thought wise to ask. The town sits less than half a day away. You hear it before you reach the gate. Hammering, cartwheels, geese protesting some private injustice. Then the bell of the parish church answering faintly across the fields. A wooden bridge carries you over a muddy ditch and toward the town wall, where a gatekeeper collects tolls from merchants bringing cloth, onions, salted eels, and firewood inside. You enter beneath an arch blackened by years of smoke. The market square is already crowded. Stalls stand beneath patched awnings. Fishmongers arrange smoked herring on boards. A baker sells small loaves beside baskets of onions. A woman in a russet cloak offers ribbons, pins, and cheap pilgrim badges stamped from pewter. Chickens wander with more confidence than several merchants. You follow the lay brother through the crowd while trying not to step into anything that will follow you home on your boots. The first rumour comes from an ale cellar. He has heard that a nun from somewhere north of the river once climbed over her convent wall dressed in a servant's cloak and vanished with the night. The woman beside him says it was not a knight. It was a miller. A third insists there was never a wall involved at all. No one can quite agree whether they are even speaking about the same woman. You continue toward the oil merchant. The story follows you. At a cloth stall, an elderly merchant claims that women who abandon religious vows are cursed to wander without rest until they return to the house they left. His apprentice quietly says his aunt's cousin knew a former nun who married a cooper and lived perfectly well into old age. The merchant tells him to stop ruining a useful warning. The apprentice returns to measuring wool. You buy nothing, but you remember the exchange. Rumour here behaves like smoke beneath rafters. It finds every gap. At the parish porch, you meet 3 pilgrims sheltering from the wind. Their cloaks are decorated with badges from distant shrines, scallop shells, tiny saints, and a small lead ampulla meant to carry holy water or oil. One pilgrim tells you that a bishop can release almost anyone from almost anything if sufficient reason exists. Another says this is nonsense. The third is eating a turnip and declines to participate. They have heard stories of vows judged invalid because they were taken too young, under pressure, or without proper consent. They have also heard stories of people sent back behind religious walls after years away. Some swear that powerful family can make difficult questions disappear beneath wax seals and polite letters. Others insist that church courts are stubborn precisely when rich families expect otherwise. Even now, it is hard to tell how much of what you hear is law, memory, resentment, or ale. That uncertainty follows you into a smoky tavern near the market gate. You stop there while the lay brother bargains for lamp oil. The room is warm enough to make your frozen fingers ache as they thaw. Rushes cover the floor. A pot of pottage bubbles over the hearth. 2 travellers share a trencher of coarse bread and smoked fish, while a merchant warms his wet gloves near the flames. On a shelf above the fire sits a tiny relic case. The innkeeper claims it holds a splinter from St. Martin's staff. A customer says St. Martin probably owned several staffs if all the taverns claiming pieces are to be believed. The innkeeper replies that saints possess resources beyond ordinary understanding. No one challenges this highly convenient theology. Then someone mentions a runaway nun. Not Eleanor. Not by name. But the talk makes you listen. A merchant tells of a woman from a convent near a coastal town who left with a soldier and was dragged back after her family complained. A carter says he knows another who simply disappeared into a distant city where no one recognized her. A widow beside the hearth says the most dangerous part is not being found. It is being unwanted. A woman without family protection, she explains, may struggle to rent a room, find honest work, defend herself in a manor court, or persuade anyone that promises made by a lover will survive the first difficult winter. Her words settle more quietly than the other stories. You think of Eleanor's pale face. You think of the convent storehouse filled with grain, the bell that tells her when to rise, the blanket issued each winter, the roof that leaks, certainly, but is still a roof. Outside, traders begin packing away their goods as afternoon fades. You purchase the needles. The lay brother secures the oil. Before leaving, you stop at the badge seller. Among images of saints lies a small pewter figure of St. Leonard, sometimes invoked by prisoners and those seeking release from bonds. You turn it in your palm. The seller says pilgrims carry such badges for protection. Some sew them into hats. Some pin them inside cloaks. Some swear that losing one on the road means the saint has taken the misfortune meant for the traveller. You put the badge back. The road home darkens beneath a violet sky. Watchfires appear on distant manor land. Your boots sink into thawing mud where afternoon sun has softened the track. When the convent bell finally reaches you across the fields, you find yourself listening differently. Behind those walls, Eleanor may imagine the outside world as freedom. Here on the road, after a day of gossip, tolls, cold wind, and conflicting stories, freedom looks far less simple. By the time the oak gate opens for you, one thought remains. If Eleanor chooses the road, she will not leave the convent alone. She will carry every rumour about women like her with her. Rain begins again after sunset. It arrives softly at first, tapping against the chapel roof and darkening the cloister stones, then grows steadier until every gutter spills silver threads into the courtyard. Wind presses wet leaves against the outer wall. The convent seems to draw inward around its fires, shutters, and thick oak doors, as though the entire house intends to wait out the night without troubling the wider world. You return from the guest-house hearth carrying 2 pieces of split wood beneath your arm. Your cloak is damp at the shoulders. The rough-coated dog trails behind you, pauses to shake rain over your boots, and then looks mildly offended when you object. Inside the kitchen, evening pottage has already been cleared away. A few crusts of coarse bread remain on a wooden trencher. The cook covers tomorrow's dough with linen while another sister hangs iron fire tongs beside the hearth. Everything feels ordinary. That is what makes Eleanor's stillness so noticeable. She stands near the passage leading toward the dormitory, listening to the bell for Compline. Her face is calm. Too calm. You've seen people settle into that expression before difficult journeys, when fear has been considered so many times that it finally exhausts itself. The bell sounds again. The sisters move toward the chapel. You follow more slowly. Inside, beeswax candles cast small pools of gold along worn stone. Damp hems whisper across the floor. The air holds incense, wet wool, and the faint mineral chill of the walls. Eleanor kneels in her usual place. Mother Beatrice sits several paces ahead. For a long while, nothing happens except prayer. Yet when the final responses fade, Eleanor does not rise immediately. Her fingers remain wrapped around her rosary. At her wrist, the blue thread from Martin's lavender has faded nearly grey. Some swear that a thread tied while thinking of someone you love should not be cut, because severing it invites separation. Others say such customs belong to foolish village girls and old grandmothers. Eleanor apparently has decided not to test either opinion. When the sisters leave the chapel, she returns to the dormitory. You go back toward the guest house. Then, some time later, you hear the soft scrape of a door. You step into the covered passage. Eleanor stands near the linen room with a candle. She has changed nothing about her clothing, but she carries a small cloth bundle. That is enough. You understand. She sees you. Neither of you speaks for several breaths. Then she asks quietly whether the road toward the river remains passable. You tell her what you saw in town. The mud, the toll gate, the pilgrims, the conflicting stories. The widow who said the greatest danger might be discovering that no one outside the walls is willing to take responsibility for you. Eleanor listens. Raindrums steadily overhead. You expect uncertainty to return to her face. Instead, she nods. I know her expression seems to say, she has already been afraid of these things. Fear has not stopped her. She enters the linen room. You remain near the doorway while she opens a small chest assigned to her use. There is remarkably little to choose from. A spare shift, wool stockings, a patched veil, a comb made from horn. None of these feels like the beginning of a new life. She takes a plain wool cloak, thick but worn at one shoulder. Whether she has the right to take it is another question entirely, and Mother Beatrice's warning about convent property clearly passes through her mind. She hesitates, then folds it anyway. From the kitchen she has already secured a heel of coarse bread and 2 small pieces of hard cheese. She adds them to the bundle. There is also a tiny leather purse. You hear coins shift inside. Not many. Perhaps enough for a night at a cheap inn, perhaps less if the innkeeper has recently discovered ambition. She opens her hand. 3 small coins. You look at them. She looks at them. Medieval romance, you decide, becomes considerably less poetic once someone calculates lodging. Eleanor almost smiles. Then she reaches beneath her sleeve and removes a pilgrim badge. Saint Leonard. The same saint whose badge you handled in the market. You do not ask where she obtained it. Perhaps someone brought it from town. Perhaps it has been hers for years. Some invoke St. Leonard for captives, prisoners, and those seeking release from bonds. Whether a solemn vow counts as a bond from which one should seek release depends very much upon whom you ask. No one can quite agree whether Eleanor carries the badge out of faith, superstition, or desperation. Perhaps she herself cannot distinguish among the 3. She wraps it in a scrap of linen and places it beside the bread. Then comes the Psalter. She takes the worn book from beneath folded cloth. For a moment, you think she means to carry it. Her hand rests on the leather cover. Inside lies Martin's letter. But the book belongs to the convent. Slowly, Eleanor opens it. She finds the folded parchment, removes it, then places the Psalter back in the chest. That small act seems harder than packing everything else. A book has marked her prayers for years. Its pages have absorbed wax smoke, fingertips, winter breath, whispered words, and perhaps tears no one has noticed. She closes the lid. Outside, the rain begins to ease. From somewhere beyond the walls comes the distant bark of a farm dog. Eleanor turns toward the gate passage. You catch her sleeve, not to stop her, only because you have heard the iron key being checked after Compline since Mother Beatrice began watching. Eleanor understands. She reaches inside her cloak. The key is there. Heavy, dark, cold. The same missing key that caused 10 minutes of convent-wide panic days before. So that mystery, at least, is solved. But she does not go yet. Instead, she walks toward the chapel one last time. You follow only as far as the doorway. Inside, a sanctuary lamp burns dimly. Eleanor kneels. Her bundle rests beside her. No grand prayer reaches you, only silence. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether she asks forgiveness, permission, courage, or some impossible combination of all three. After a while she stands. A monastery bell from far across the valley answers the rain. Eleanor lifts her bundle. She turns away from the chapel, and for the first time you see that her choice is no longer about whether she wants to leave. It is about whether she can make herself open the door. Eleanor waits until the convent is quiet enough that every small sound seems enormous. The final bell has long faded. The rain has thinned to a cold mist, and somewhere beyond the dormitory wall, water still drips from the eaves at slow, patient intervals. You stand with her beneath the covered passage, listening to the building breathe around you. A sister turns in her sleep behind a closed door. A timber settles. The rough-coated dog scratches once against the kitchen threshold. Then silence returns. Eleanor holds the iron key inside her sleeve so it will not strike against the buckle of her small bundle. Her other hand grips the wool cloak gathered tightly beneath her chin. She looks toward the chapel. Only once. Then she begins walking. You follow. The cloister feels different at this hour. By daylight, it is a place of footsteps, baskets, washing, conversation held low, and sisters crossing between duties. Now the arcade is almost colourless beneath the dying moon. Puddles lie between the stones. The last beeswax candle inside the chapel throws a thin bar of amber light beneath its door. Your boots make almost no sound. Eleanor's make less. You pass the linen room, the storehouse, the doorway where Mother Beatrice questioned her. At the far end of the passage stands the gate corridor. The oak door beyond it is black with age, its iron straps damp from the night air. Eleanor stops. For several breaths she simply looks at it. You realize that she has crossed this threshold many times before, but always with permission, always accompanied, always certain that she will return. Tonight the same door has become something entirely different. She removes the key. It is heavy enough that her wrist dips beneath its weight. Some people in the surrounding villages hang old keys near beds or hearths, because iron is believed to turn away certain spirits and harmful influences. No one can quite agree whether the protection lies in the iron itself, the shape of the key, or the blessing once spoken over a doorway. Tonight, the key seems less interested in spirits than in practical rebellion. Eleanor slides it into the lock. It does not turn. She tries again. Nothing. For one dreadful second, both of you stare at the door. Then you remember the portress lifting the key slightly before twisting it. You touch Eleanor's wrist and raise the iron shaft. She turns. The lock gives with a dull clunk that sounds loud enough to wake every saint in the chapel. Neither of you moves. Nothing follows. Then the dog sneezes somewhere behind you. Eleanor closes her eyes. If there is a worse companion for a secret escape than a convent dog, you have yet to meet it. She lifts the latch. Cold air enters immediately. The outer yard is silver with frost and mist. You slip through. The small gatehouse window remains dark. Near the wall, yesterday's rain has left a shallow pool covered by a skin of new ice. Your boot breaks it with a quiet crack. You both freeze. Still nothing. The final gate stands ahead. Beyond it lies the road. Eleanor's breathing has become shallow. She grips the St. Leonard badge through the cloth of her bundle. Some swear that travellers should begin a difficult journey with the right foot, particularly if leaving before dawn. Others insist that making the sign of the cross 3 times is more sensible. Eleanor does both, apparently unwilling to negotiate with bad luck at such an hour. The second lock opens more easily. You push the gate. Its lower edge drags through mud with a long scrape. Eleanor slips outside. You follow, then turn and pull the gate almost close behind you. Not fully. The iron key remains in Eleanor's hand. She looks at it. For a moment she seems tempted to keep it. Then she reaches through the narrow gap and sets it carefully on the inner stone ledge. That, at least, will belong to the convent when morning comes. The road stretches ahead beneath the sky just beginning to pale. Mud shines between frozen ruts. Bare trees lean over the ditch. River mist lies low across the fields, hiding fences and turning distant hedges into grey islands. Eleanor takes one step, then another. Behind you the dog appears. He squeezes through the partly open gate with astonishing confidence, shakes moisture from his coat, and trots directly to Eleanor. She stares at him. No, her face says. The dog wags his tail. She points back toward the convent. He sits down. You try walking toward the gate. He follows you. You turn toward the road. He follows again. Apparently he has selected exile. Eleanor crouches and presses both hands around his rough head. For the first time that night she laughs softly. It is brief. Almost immediately the first bell sounds. Behind the wall, deep, measured, familiar. Eleanor rises. Another toll follows. Then another. The sisters are being called from sleep. Within minutes, someone will discover the key on the ledge. Soon afterward, someone will notice the empty pallet. You begin walking faster. The road slopes downward through a stand of alder trees. Wet branches brush your shoulders. Somewhere in the mist, a horse whinnies from a field. Eleanor does not look back until the convent is nearly hidden. When she finally turns, only the upper chapel roof remains visible above the trees. The bell continues. Each sound reaches you more faintly than the last. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether Eleanor cries at that moment. Some say she does. Others insist she keeps her face dry and her eyes fixed on the road. What you notice is simpler. She listens until the bell can no longer be heard. Then she pulls the wool cloak closer around her shoulders. Her fingers are shaking from cold. The dog trots ahead with his nose low to the muddy track. And beneath a whitening winter sky, the three of you leave the convent road behind and turn toward the long pilgrim route beyond the river. The pilgrim road begins as little more than 2 muddy ruts running between frost-stiff fields. By full morning, the mist has lifted enough for you to see hedges silvered along their upper branches and distant strips of woodland dark against the pale winter sky. Eleanor walks beside you with her hood drawn low. The wool cloak she carried from the convent is already damp at the hem, and the small bundle at her side grows heavier with every mile, though nothing inside it weighs much more than bread, cheese, stockings, a folded letter, and the uncertain shape of the life ahead. The dog ranges before you. He investigates every ditch, milestone, root, dung heap, and suspicious tuft of grass with the diligence of a royal inspector. At a crossroads, the narrow convent track joins the larger pilgrim route. Here the world suddenly feels populated again. A group of travellers approaches from the west, 2 women in heavy cloaks, an old man carrying a staff, a younger pilgrim with a scallop shell badge fixed to his hat, and a merchant leading a tired pack horse loaded with sacks of dyed wool. They greet you without much curiosity. People meet strangers constantly on roads like these. Questions usually come later. For the first few miles you travel together because numbers offer comfort against thieves, bad weather, loose dogs, and the ordinary inconvenience of getting lost. The older pilgrim carries a small pouch containing what he claims is soil taken from beside a saint's tomb. Some swear that a pinch placed beneath the pillow protects travellers from nightmares. Another pilgrim says it mostly protects pillows from smelling pleasant. The old man ignores him. Eleanor walks quietly. She has removed her veil. Not entirely. The white cloth beneath it remains folded inside her bundle, but her hair is now covered with a plain wool kerchief borrowed before leaving the convent guest-house doors, making her appear at first glance like any modest traveller. At first glance. The difficulty begins when people look longer. Her hands are wrong for a peasant woman. They are not soft, exactly. Convent work has given them calluses from laundry, herbs, bread dough, and winter firewood. Yet they are not field hands either. Her speech is careful. She reads signs nailed beside shrines. She knows Latin responses when pilgrims pray. She wakes instinctively when distant bells mark canonical hours. The habits of the cloister cling to her as stubbornly as the smell of wet wool. At midday, you rest beneath a roadside shelter built beside a shrine to St. Christopher. Its roof sags. Someone has left a stub of beeswax candle beneath the painted saint, alongside 3 bent pins, a dried flower, and a copper coin so worn that the king's face has become little more than an optimistic bump. You share coarse bread with the other travellers. The merchant produces smoked fish. Eleanor contributes one of her small cheeses. Everyone eats from knives and fingers, using thick bread as makeshift trenchers. The dog receives several scraps and immediately begins treating the entire pilgrim company as lifelong friends. Conversation drifts toward destinations. One woman is travelling to a shrine to pray for her husband's aching joints. The old man seeks forgiveness for an oath he regrets. The merchant is not a pilgrim at all, but travelling with pilgrims makes robbery slightly less convenient for robbers. Then someone asks Eleanor where she comes from. Her hand pauses over the bread. You feel the moment tighten. She names a village near the convent. This is not entirely false. She has passed through it before. The pilgrim asks whether she's married. Eleanor says no. Another asks whether she travels to family. She says she hopes so. No one presses further. Yet after the group begins walking again, Eleanor falls silent. You understand why. Every ordinary question now demands calculation. A birthplace. A family name. An occupation. A parish. A husband. A reason for being alone on the road. Inside the convent, everyone knew exactly who she was. Outside it, she must decide who she is each time someone asks. By afternoon, sleep begins. The wind pushes tiny grains of ice against your faces, and the road turns slick beneath boots and hooves. One of the merchant's pack horses loses a shoe and begins favouring its left foreleg. Travel slows. Eventually, bells reach you through the grey weather. Not the convent bells. Another religious house. A small monastery stands near the pilgrim road behind low stone walls and an orchard stripped bare for winter. Its guest house receives travellers according to custom when space allows. You enter beneath dripping eaves, grateful for walls. A lay brother takes the merchant's horse toward a stable and points the rest of you toward a hall where straw pallets line one side. The air smells of wood smoke, boiled cabbage, damp leather, and humanity. To you, it is luxurious. A fire burns. There is warm pottage. There is ale. There is a roof that does not leak directly onto your face. Medieval standards of comfort have a remarkable ability to improve after 10 miles in sleet. Eleanor sits near the hearth. Steam rises from her cloak. For the first time since leaving, she seems almost calm. Then a monk enters. He is thin, sharp-eyed, and ink-stained at 2 fingers. He speaks to each traveller, noting names and destinations in a small account book because the monastery keeps track of guests, provisions, and alms. When he reaches Eleanor, his gaze lingers. He asks her parish. She answers. He asks whether she carries a pilgrim token. She shows the St. Leonard badge. His eyes move from the badge to her hands, then to the faint pale line across her forehead where a veil usually rests. You see Eleanor understand that he sees too much. No accusation comes, not yet, but the world outside has suddenly become less anonymous than she hoped. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how easily a former nun could disappear among ordinary travellers. Some surely did. Others carried unmistakable habits of speech, prayer, dress, and education that made questions inevitable. That night, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket beside the guest-house fire, you wake when distant monastery bells call the monks to prayer. Across the room, Eleanor is already awake. She is listening. Not because anyone has found her, not because anyone has stopped her, but because for the first time she understands something the convent walls once concealed. Beyond them, every stranger may ask who she is, and every answer may carry her closer to freedom or back toward the gate she has left behind. The monastery bell wakes you again before dawn, though this time you're not certain you ever truly fell asleep. The guest-house fire has collapsed into red embers. Around you, pilgrims shift beneath coarse wool blankets, while the merchant mutters something in his dreams, and the dog lies curled against Eleanor's feet, as though he has been assigned there by ecclesiastical authority. Beyond the shutters, wind brushes sleet against the wall in dry little bursts. The sharp-eyed monk enters carrying a covered lamp. He moves quietly between the pallets. When he reaches Eleanor, he stops. She is awake already. He asks whether she intends to remain another night. Eleanor says no. The monk studies her for a moment, then asks whether her family expects her. She answers that someone does. It is not quite the answer he requested. His gaze drops toward the small bundle beside her. Then he notices the edge of Martin's folded letter where it has shifted beneath the linen wrapping. Eleanor closes the bundle. The monk says nothing about it. Instead, he asks whether she has recently stayed in a religious house. The question hangs in the cold room. You hear the merchant snore. Eleanor tells him that she has. The monk waits. She adds that she's travelling under her own decision. This earns another long silence. Some swear that monks and priests could recognize a runaway nun immediately by posture, speech, or the habits of prayer learned over years. That sounds convenient when told beside a tavern fire much later. In truth, no one can quite agree how much the monk understands that morning. But you know he suspects something. At last, he tells Eleanor the river road is safer than the forest track. Then he turns away. No accusation. No raised alarm. Only advice. You gather your things quickly. Breakfast is coarse bread dipped in weak ale, and by sunrise you're walking again. The sleet has stopped, but the road remains glazed in places. Frozen puddles crack beneath your heels. Your breath hangs white in the air. The dog trots ahead, occasionally returning to confirm that none of you has vanished since his previous inspection. Martin's letter names a place near the river crossing, an alehouse called the Heart and Candle. He has written that if Eleanor ever truly decides to leave, she should wait there. The wording seemed romantic when hidden inside the psalter. After several hours of cold walking, it sounds mostly like directions to somewhere with a roof. You reach the alehouse shortly after midday. A painted wooden sign swings above the door, showing a deer beside a candle whose flame has faded into something resembling a yellow turnip. Inside, smoke gathers beneath soot-black rafters. The hearth burns fiercely, though half its warmth appears committed to escaping through cracks in the roof. Rushes cover the floor, mixed with straw, dried herbs, spilled ale, and whatever history people sensibly avoid examining too closely. Eleanor sits near the wall. Her wet cloak steams gently. You order 2 bowls of onion pottage and a small loaf. The innkeeper places them down without ceremony. Hull follows. The dog receives nothing officially, but soon acquires a piece of bacon from a carter who has clearly surrendered control of his lunch. Eleanor watches the door. Each time it opens, winter air spills into the room. A farmer enters, then 2 wool merchants, then a woman carrying eggs in a covered basket. Not Martin. The afternoon lengthens. Travellers trade rumours round the hearth. One man claims the northern road has been blocked by a broken cartwheel. Another says armed retainers belonging to a local lord have been stopping strangers near the bridge because of a dispute over tolls. Someone else insists the bishop's men are searching for a thief dressed as a pilgrim. Eleanor touches the St. Leonard badge beneath her cloak. You tell her none of these stories necessarily concerns her. She nods without looking away from the door. Near sunset, another traveller arrives. Your stomach tightens before you even see his face. It is the sharp-eyed monk from the monastery. His cloak is speckled with mud. He recognizes you immediately. He orders ale and sits at a table close enough to make coincidence feel ambitious. For some time, he does nothing. Then he asks whether the person Eleanor expects has arrived. She says no. He asks whether this person knows she is coming. She says yes. He asks what she will do if he does not come. That question reaches deeper than the others. Eleanor looks at the hearth. A half-burned beeswax candle stands in an iron holder nearby, its flame bending whenever the door opens. There are old beliefs that a flame leaning toward a traveller means someone approaches, while a flame leaning away warns of disappointment. Tonight it leans in every direction. Medieval prophecy occasionally suffers from drafts. Eleanor finally says she will wait until morning. The monk considers this. Then he asks whether she is somewhere safe to go afterward. She does not answer. Even now, it is hard to tell whether his questions come from suspicion, concern, duty, or all 3. At last he lowers his voice. He tells her that roads are filled with promises easier to make than keep. A person who leaves a protected household for another person places enormous trust in someone who may be delayed, frightened, persuaded otherwise, or simply less courageous than expected. Eleanor's expression tightens. She already knows. That is what waiting has been teaching her hour after hour. Night settles completely. The alehouse fills with the smell of damp wool, smoke, cooked onions, and tallow. Men roll dice near the hearth. A woman repairs a torn sleeve with thick thread. The innkeeper lowers the shutters and sets an iron fire tongue across the door latch, a local habit he claims discourages both thieves and troublesome spirits. You suspect the thieves are more impressed by the lock. Still Martin does not come. Eleanor unfolds his letter once. She reads it beneath candlelight, then folds it again. The dog rests his chin on her knee. Outside, hoofbeats pass. She rises. They fade toward the bridge. She sits down. The suspicious monk watches without speaking. By the time the final candle is burned nearly to its socket, Eleanor is no longer watching every traveller. She is watching the door itself, and you begin to understand that leaving the convent required one kind of courage, Waiting to discover whether anyone is waiting for her beyond it requires another. Martin arrives after dawn, when Eleanor has almost stopped expecting him. The alehouse is barely awake. Grey light presses through the shutters, revealing smoke suspended beneath the rafters and last night's cups abandoned along the tables. The innkeeper is stirring yesterday's embers back into flame. Someone in the stable coughs. The rough-coated dog lies beneath your bench with one eye open, maintaining the sort of vigilance usually associated with men receiving wages for it. Eleanor has not slept much. Her head rests briefly against the wall, but whenever hooves sound outside, her eyes open. Most belong to carts. One belongs to a priest riding south. Another turns out to be a farmer delivering onions. By now you've learned that hope can make an ordinary road remarkably exhausting. Then the door opens. Cold air enters. Martin stands there. For a heartbeat, Eleanor does not move. His dark cloak is streaked with dried mud. One boot has been wrapped with cloth where the leather has split near the ankle. His hair is wet with river mist, and the leather document case hangs crookedly across his shoulder. He looks less like the man who passed lavender beside the convent herb garden, and more like someone who has spent a miserable night discovering every bad section of road between here and the bishop's town. Eleanor rises. Martin sees her. Relief changes his entire face. No grand embrace follows. The sharp-eyed monk still sits beside the hearth. The innkeeper is watching. Two merchants have suddenly developed an intense interest in their breakfast. So Martin simply bows his head. Eleanor does the same. For a few moments, that is enough. He explains that a cart broke an axle on the northern road, blocking the narrower stretch near a flooded ditch. He tried another track, lost several hours, and then found the bridge gate closed after dark. You remember the rumour from the night before? For once, tavern gossip has accidentally been useful. Martin asks if Eleanor is well. She says she is. Then he notices the exhaustion beneath her eyes and stops pretending the answer satisfies him. You leave the hearth and candle shortly after sunrise. The sharp-eyed monk does not follow. He merely watches from the doorway while you take the road toward the river. Mist lies thick over the water. Willow branches trail above the bank, their bare tips dark with moisture. The river moves slowly beneath a pale sky, brown and cold, carrying broken reeds and scraps of winter leaves downstream. Near the crossing stands a toll hut and a wooden bridge reinforced with rough stone piers. A small shrine has been built beside the approach. Travellers have tucked coins, bits of ribbon, and even a cracked comb beneath the painted image of Saint Christopher, protector of journeys. Some swear that seeing his image in the morning keeps a traveller safe from sudden death until sunset. Martin touches 2 fingers to his brow as you pass. Eleanor does the same. Neither appears eager to challenge the claim. Beyond the bridge, you stop beneath a stand of alder trees where the road bends away from the toll-keeper. For the first time, Martin and Eleanor can speak without strangers listening. The conversation begins gently. He tells her he feared she would change her mind. She tells him she nearly did. He says he would have understood. She says that would have made everything worse. Then the practical questions begin. They arrive one by one, quiet and heavy. Where will they live? Martin looks toward the river. He has no house. Not yet. He rents a small chamber in the bishop's town above a cooper's workshop, hardly large enough for one person and technically forbidden to additional occupants without the owner's consent. He has savings, but less than Eleanor imagined. Her younger brother has been ill. Their widowed mother depends partly upon Martin's earnings. He has also borrowed money from another clerk after replacing a horse that went lame the previous spring. Eleanor listens without interruption. Secret letters, you discover, tend to contain surprisingly little information about debt. Martin says he has applied for a better position with a household steward. No answer has come. If he receives it, they might afford rooms. If he does not, his present wages barely cover food, rent, clothing, ink, and family obligations. You glance at the dog. The dog appears financially independent. Eleanor asks whether Martin's mother knows about her. His silence answers first. Eventually he says she knows there is someone. Not who. Not that Eleanor is a nun, or was a nun, or may still be one in the eyes of the church. Even now, it is hard to tell which word Eleanor herself prefers. Martin explains that his mother expects him to marry eventually, but probably not a woman whose arrival might attract questions from a bishop. There is another difficulty. Marriage. Eleanor asks him directly whether he still intends it. Martin says yes. Immediately. Then, more carefully, he admits that intention is not permission. If her vows remain binding, a priest may refuse them. Even if they find a willing priest, the marriage itself may later be challenged. His employer could dismiss him for bringing scandal into the household. His family could refuse to receive her. No one can quite agree whether Martin understands all the legal consequences at this moment, but he understands enough to be frightened. Eleanor turns away. The river moves beside her. She reaches beneath her cloak and touches Martin's letter. For days it has represented possibility. Now the man who wrote it stands beside her, admitting that possibility needs rent, food, permission, reputation, employment, and somewhere to put a bed. Love has survived the road. Whether it can survive accounting remains uncertain. Martin steps closer. He does not make another promise. Instead, he removes one glove and offers his hand. His fingers are red from cold and stained faintly with ink. Eleanor looks at them, then places her hand in his. That small gesture seems more serious than anything written in the hidden letter. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether Eleanor feels disappointed at the river crossing. Perhaps she does, but disappointment is not the same as regret. She has not found a shining future waiting beyond the convent wall. She has found Martin. Cold, tired, indebted, worried, and still here. Across the water, the town bell begins to sound. Martin listens. Then he tells Eleanor there is one thing they cannot avoid any longer. Before they can speak seriously of marriage, they must discover whether the church will allow her to remain outside the convent at all. Eleanor tightens her fingers around his. Behind you, the dog shakes river mist from his coat, and together you turn toward the road leading to the officials who may decide what her promise still means. The road toward the church officials' residence is wider than the pilgrim track and considerably less forgiving. Frozen ruts shake passing carts from side to side. The river mist thins as the morning brightens, revealing bare fields divided by hedges and low stone walls. Martin walks beside Eleanor, one hand resting near the strap of his document case, while you follow with the rough-coated dog weaving between all three of you, as if determined to complicate any proceeding that values dignity. No one talks much. There is little left to say before the questions begin. By midday, the road climbs toward a small walled town clustered around a stone church. Its tower rises above tiled roofs blackened by winter rain. Near the gate, merchants argue over market tolls while a clerk records carts entering with grain, wool, and barrels of ale. Martin knows the town. He points toward a narrow lane where the archdeacon's officials keep rooms beside an older manor hall used for legal hearings. Eleanor slows. The building does not resemble a place where lives are decided. It resembles almost every other respectable medieval hall: thick walls, narrow windows, a roof badly acquainted with straight lines, and a door large enough to imply importance. Inside, however, everything smells of wax, parchment, damp wool, and authority. A clerk sits behind an oak table sharpening a quill. Another sorts rolled documents tied with cord. On a shelf rests a small wooden box containing seals. Near the hearth, a brazier struggles to warm the room. You decide that even justice must wear 2 pairs of stockings in winter. Eleanor gives her name. The clerk looks up, then looks again. News has travelled faster than you have. A message from Mother Beatrice has already arrived. No one can quite agree whether the convent sends the letter the morning after Eleanor leaves or later that day, but the seal is unmistakable. The abbess reports her absence, the circumstances surrounding the missing key, and her earlier admission that she wishes to leave for Martin. Eleanor closes her eyes for a moment. Martin says nothing. You're led into a smaller chamber where 3 men wait the archdeacon's deputy, an elderly priest familiar with the convent, and a legal clerk with ink stains reaching almost to his knuckles. The deputy does not shout. That surprises you. He asks Eleanor to sit. Then he asks when she entered the convent. She gives the year as best she remembers. How old was she? She hesitates. Perhaps 15. Perhaps 16. Her family recorded births poorly. The elderly priest frowns. Dates matter. Memory does not always cooperate. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about Eleanor's exact age when her vows were taken, and suddenly that uncertainty becomes more than a storytelling inconvenience. The clerk begins writing. Was she compelled to enter? Eleanor says no. Then she pauses. Her father strongly wished it. Her mother agreed. There had been little property for marriage portions, and 2 older sisters already needed dowries. The deputy asks whether she objected. She says she does not remember objecting openly. That answer produces another line of ink. Medieval families often understand choice differently from the way a traveller centuries later might imagine it. A daughter may technically consent while standing inside a world where obedience, economics, family honour, and limited alternatives press upon every decision. Some swear that any pressure invalidates a vow. The legal clerk quietly explains that matters are rarely so simple. Was the profession solemn? Yes. Were proper witnesses present? Eleanor thinks so. The elderly priest remembers the ceremony. He was not officiating, but he attended. He recalls candles, a veil, a spoken formula. He remembers Eleanor kneeling near the altar. He does not remember her expression. No one asks candles for testimony, which is fortunate because medieval candles already have enough supernatural duties. Then comes the matter of documents. A register is produced. The parchment is worn and darkened along its folds. Eleanor's name appears in a hand older than the clerk now reading it. There is a notation beside it. The legal clerk leans closer. 1 word has faded. Another may have been corrected. The deputy asks whether a formal declaration of profession survives. The elderly priest says perhaps one exists at the convent. Perhaps not. A roof leak damaged several stored papers years ago. Even now, it is hard to tell whether that missing parchment helps Eleanor or merely makes everything slower. The questions continue. Has she lived according to her vows for years? Yes. Has she represented herself publicly as a nun? Yes. Has she received property through the convent? No personal inheritance, she says. Did her family provide anything when she entered? A modest sum. Perhaps some linen, possibly a silver cup. She is unsure what became of it. The deputy rubs his forehead. A life that felt simple inside the convent becomes astonishingly complicated when converted into legal questions. Then Martin is questioned. Did he persuade Eleanor to leave? He says no. Did he write to her? Yes. Did he promise marriage? He hesitates only a moment. Yes. Did he understand that her vows might prevent it? Not fully. The deputy gives him a look suggesting that love letters would benefit from occasional legal consultation. Martin lowers his eyes. The dog, meanwhile, has settled near the hearth and begins snoring softly. No one removes him. Perhaps even church courts recognize when a creature has chosen neutrality. At last, Eleanor asks the only question she truly cares about. Can she be released? The room quiets. The deputy explains that he cannot simply declare her free that afternoon. Her case must be examined. Further testimony may be needed. The convent must respond. Her family may be contacted. A higher authority may have to decide whether there are grounds for dispensation, annulment of the profession, or some other lawful resolution. Until then, her status remains uncertain. She may not marry. She should not disappear. And she should remain where officials can find her. Eleanor asks whether she must return immediately to the convent. The deputy considers the matter. Then, perhaps because forcing her back at once may create more trouble than it solves, he allows her temporary lodging outside while inquiries continue. Martin exhales for what feels like the first time all afternoon. Eleanor does not. She watches the clerk sand the wet ink on the page. The grains scatter across her name. That evening you leave the hall beneath a sky already turning dark. Church bells sound above the rooftops. Martin pulls his cloak tighter. Eleanor walks beside him, neither free nor returned, neither wife nor comfortably nun. Behind you, parchment now holds her story in careful lines. Ahead lies nothing but waiting. Winter settles over the manor village before any decision arrives. At first, you measure the waiting in days, then in bells, then in small domestic routines that have nothing to do with bishops, vows, or the uncertain future waiting somewhere beyond the next messenger's horse. Eleanor is lodged in a widow's house near the edge of the village, where the walls are timber-framed and packed with clay. The roof is thatched, and smoke escapes through whatever part of the ceiling happens to be most cooperative. Martin cannot remain there. His work keeps him in the bishop's town several days each week, so he rides back when he can, sometimes arriving after dark with mud dried to his cloak and new creases around his eyes. The widow, Agnes, charges little for the pallet and meals because Eleanor helps in return. There is always work. Water must be carried from the well before ice thickens around the rim. Cabbages must be trimmed. Barley must be ground. Wool must be carded. A cracked wooden bucket must be bound again with iron hoops. Laundry must be boiled in a cauldron with lye made from ash, then beaten and rinsed until your hands sting from cold. You discover very quickly that leaving a convent does not release a person from chores. It merely changes who complains when they're done badly. Agnes is exceptionally talented at this. She shows Eleanor how to stretch every loaf through several meals, softening old bread in broth, adding peas to pottage, and saving drippings from roasted meat for days when no meat remains. The winter storehouse is small compared with the convent's, but its contents are guarded just as carefully: sacks of oats, strings of onions, dried beans, smoked fish, apples wrinkled almost beyond recognition, and 2 precious jars of honey. Eleanor often pauses before those shelves. Inside the convent, food appeared according to a rhythm she rarely questioned. Here, She sees how close a household always stands to shortage. A spoiled sack matters. A frozen hen matters. A week of bad weather matters. One afternoon, Agnes discovers that mice have chewed into a bag of barley. Her reaction suggests the mice have declared open war. A clay pot is set as a trap. Dried mint is scattered near the wall, and an old iron key is placed beside the grain because Agnes insists iron discourages both vermin and ill fortune. No one can quite agree whether the mice understand the symbolism. The dog certainly does not. He steals a crust from the trap before the first mouse arrives. The rough-coated creature has remained with you since the convent road, and by now the village treats him as though he has always belonged there. He sleeps beneath Agnes's table, follows Eleanor to the well, and appears whenever anyone unwraps smoked fish. Waiting would be easier if it consisted only of waiting. Instead, Eleanor must become visible. The manor court meets twice during those weeks in a low hall beside the Reeves' house. Tenants gather to settle small disputes over boundaries, unpaid labour, wandering animals, and damaged hedges. Eleanor attends once because Agnes needs a witness concerning a pig that has repeatedly entered her winter garden. The pig belongs to a neighbour who claims it is unusually clever. Agnes says cleverness does not restore cabbages. You sit near the wall while men and women argue in careful turns. Eleanor listens. The scene unsettles her more than she expects. Here, everyone is known through land, family, tenancy, obligation, and reputation. Agnes is the widow in the Eastern cottage. Martin is the clerk whose mother lives beyond the mill road. You are the traveller who somehow keeps appearing where unnecessary trouble develops. But Eleanor has no easy description. Some villagers call her sister Eleanor without thinking. Others deliberately do not. A few stare at the faded line where her veil once rested. Rumour has reached them. Of course it has. Rumour crosses frozen fields faster than carts. Some say she escaped for love. Some say she was expelled. One woman insists the convent discovered witchcraft. This is dismissed quickly, though not before someone recommends carrying a piece of rowan wood against malicious charms. Some swear that rowan hung above a doorway protects the household from sorcery. Agnes hangs onions instead and says they are at least useful in soup. Eleanor laughs more easily now. Not often, but more easily. Weeks pass. Martin brings news when he can. The officials have contacted Mother Beatrice. A statement has been requested from Eleanor's surviving family. The convent has searched for older documents. One parchment may have been damaged by damp. Another may exist in a chest no one has opened in years. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the uncertainty helps her case or merely extends it. Each scrap of news seems important when Martin arrives. By the following morning, it's become one more thing to wait upon. The cold deepens. Snow covers the fields. The village pond freezes thick enough for children to test it with sticks while adults shout warnings from the bank. Eleanor spends long afternoons near Agnes's hearth repairing linen. Her stitches are precise from convent years. That skill earns her a few coins from neighbours. The first time someone pays her, she turns the small silver piece over in her palm for a long while. It is not much, yet it belongs to her. She buys salt with part of it and a small piece of wool cloth with the rest. The choice seems to please her more than either purchase. At night, the village becomes quiet early. Wind moves along the thatch. The dog sighs beside the hearth. Martin's letter remains tucked safely inside Eleanor's wooden box, alongside the St. Leonard badge and the faded blue thread. Sometimes distant bells from a priory carry across the frozen fields. Eleanor always hears them. At first, she stops whatever she's doing. Later, she simply listens while continuing to mend. Those who tell the tale never fully agree when the convent begins to feel distant to her. Perhaps it never does. Perhaps a place can remain inside a person long after its gate closes behind them. Then, near the end of a bitter afternoon, hoofbeats sound outside Agnes's cottage. The dog rises before anyone else. Eleanor's needle stops halfway through a stitch. A rider approaches through the snow, and this time he carries a sealed message. The rider stops outside Agnes's cottage beneath a sky heavy with snow. For several breaths, no one inside moves. The hoofbeats cease, leather creaks, the horse snorts into the cold, sending pale breath against the window. Then comes a knock at the door, 3 measured blows that sound much louder than they should in the small room. The dog barks once. Agnes tells him to reconsider his contribution. Eleanor sets down her needle. The unfinished stitch remains suspended in the wool cloth across her lap. You open the door. A young clerk stands outside wearing a fur-lined hood and a dark cloak crusted white at the shoulders. His horse looks as tired as he does. Mud and slush cover his boots almost to the ankle, and beneath one arm he carries a leather packet case protected by oiled cloth. He asks for Eleanor. Not Sister Eleanor. Just Eleanor. You notice that immediately. So does she. The clerk steps inside and accepts a place near the hearth while Agnes pours him warm ale. He produces a folded document sealed with dark red wax. Eleanor stares at it. For weeks she's imagined this moment. Now that it has arrived, she seems almost reluctant to touch it. There is an old belief in some households that important letters should not be opened while standing beneath a doorway, because thresholds belong to neither one place nor another, and therefore invite uncertain fortune. Agnes points firmly toward the table. Whether she believes the superstition or simply dislikes people blocking doors is impossible to tell. Eleanor sits. The wax seal bears the mark of church authority. Martin is not there. That makes the room feel strangely incomplete. The messenger explains that a copy has also been sent to the convent and another notice toward the bishop's town. Then he waits. Eleanor breaks the seal. The parchment crackles beneath her fingers. She reads slowly, once, then again. Her face gives you almost nothing. Agnes cannot read, so she watches Eleanor instead. You do the same. Finally, Eleanor places the document flat upon the table. The answer is not the simple freedom she hoped for, nor is it the command to return that she feared. The authorities have found uncertainty in the circumstances of her profession. Her young age at the time has been noted. The pressure of family expectations has been considered. Most importantly, records connected with the formal profession are incomplete, and testimony does not settle every question concerning whether all required procedures were followed exactly. No one can quite agree whether such uncertainties would have mattered in every medieval case. Written law, local practice, episcopal judgment, influence, memory, and circumstance often meet in awkward ways. Here, however, they matter enough. The document states that Eleanor may petition for formal release from the obligations attached to her profession. Until that petition is completed and approved, she is not yet free to marry. But she is not ordered immediately back behind the convent walls. The words seem almost impossibly cautious. Martin would probably admire them. Clerks have a special gift for making life-changing decisions sound like disputes over sacks of oats. Eleanor reads the crucial passage aloud once more. She may remain temporarily outside. She must present herself before the designated authority. She must answer further questions. She must accept whatever penance or conditions are imposed if release is granted. If she refuses the process and simply lives as though her vows no longer exist, she risks condemnation and future challenge. If she returns voluntarily to the convent, the matter may be closed differently. 3 roads: return, resist, or submit to the slow machinery that might, perhaps, legally open the life she wants. Agnes places another piece of wood on the fire. No one speaks for a while. Outside, snow begins falling more steadily. Eleanor touches the faded St. Leonard badge lying near her sewing box. The saint associated with release from bonds has accompanied her from the convent gate to the pilgrim road, the monastery guest house, the smoky ale house, the river, the hearing, and now this small winter cottage. Some swear that carrying such a badge long enough makes the saint responsible for seeing a journey through. Others would say the badge is only pewter. Eleanor turns it over in her hand. Then another set of hoofbeats approaches. This time the dog begins wagging his tail before anyone reaches the door. Martin enters moments later, red-faced from the cold and breathing hard from the ride. He has received word too. He looks at Eleanor. She looks at him. He asks what she wants to do. Not what she should do. Not what the bishop expects. Not what Mother Beatrice wants. What she wants. That question seems harder than any asked in the church court. Returning would restore certainty. A bed. A place. A name everyone understands. Prayer at known hours. Meals at known bells. Familiar stone beneath her feet. There might be shame, discipline, years of discomfort, perhaps forgiveness. But there would be structure. Resisting would be simpler tonight and far harder afterward. She could disappear with Martin toward another town, change her name, avoid officials, perhaps find a priest who asks few questions. Some people do exactly that. Some are never found. Others spend years fearing recognition. And then there is the 3rd road. The slow one. The lawful one. More hearings. More parchment. More witnesses. More waiting. Possibly refusal at the end. Eleanor folds the document carefully. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how long she considers the decision. Perhaps only minutes. Perhaps the silence later grows longer in memory. At last she tells Martin she will not run farther. She will petition formally. If the church releases her, she will leave the convent life lawfully. If it refuses, then she will face that answer when it comes. Martin takes her cold hand between both of his. Outside, the messenger's horse stamps in the snow. The village bell sounds beyond the roofs. Eleanor looks toward the white fields, where 3 imagined roads seem to vanish beneath the same winter sky. For the first time since opening the convent gate, she has chosen not merely to escape something. She has chosen the difficult path toward something she hopes may still become hers. The final answer does not come quickly. Winter loosens its grip first. Snow withdraws from the edges of the fields, leaving dark earth beneath flattened grass. Water begins dripping from cottage roofs. The village road, frozen hard for weeks, transforms into deep brown mud capable of stealing a poorly tied shoe with almost devotional enthusiasm. You remain with Eleanor through the waiting. There are more questions, more letters. Another journey to the church hall where the same oak table waits beneath the same narrow windows. A statement arrives from Mother Beatrice. Eleanor reads it in silence. The abbess does not accuse her of wickedness. She confirms that Eleanor lived obediently within the convent for years, that she fulfilled her duties, and that no scandal touched her before Martin began carrying documents past the house. She also confirms something Eleanor has rarely said aloud. Her father pressed strongly for the religious life because the family could not easily provide another marriage portion. Whether pressure becomes compulsion is left for others to decide. The surviving records remain incomplete. A parchment believed to contain part of the original profession has indeed suffered water damage. Several lines have vanished into brown stains. No one can quite agree whether the missing words would have strengthened Eleanor's case or destroyed it. History, like an old roof, has inconvenient leaks. At last, during the first weeks of spring, the ruling comes. Eleanor is granted release under conditions. She must perform a period of penance. She must make confession. She must formally renounce any claim upon property belonging to the convent. She's advised not to marry immediately, allowing time for the ruling to be recorded and any objections to be heard. It is not a triumphant declaration. There are no trumpets. There is only parchment, wax, careful language, and Eleanor standing beside you while a clerk reads words that mean she will not be compelled to return. Martin closes his eyes. Eleanor does not. She listens to every sentence. Afterward, you step outside into weak spring sunlight. The rough-coated dog waits beside the door. He greets the entire legal transformation of Eleanor's life by sniffing a barrel. Several weeks later, you travel once more toward the convent. Eleanor has chosen to return briefly, not to stay, to give back the wool cloak, the same cloak that crossed the gate before dawn, the same cloak that gathered rain on the pilgrim road, sleet outside the monastery, smoke in the hearth and candle, and snow outside Agnes's cottage. It belongs to the house. Eleanor wants to return it herself. The road looks different in spring. Crows search newly turned fields. Willow buds show pale green beside the river. A merchant's cart creaks ahead of you, carrying pottery toward market. At the roadside shrine, the faded ribbons beneath the carved saint has been replaced with fresh ones. Some swear that leaving a small offering at a shrine after surviving a dangerous journey prevents misfortune from following you home. Eleanor places a single coin beneath the saint. Then you climb the final hill. The convent wall appears between bare trees. For a while, she says nothing. You hear the bell. The sound reaches you exactly as it did on that first winter morning. Deep, measured, patient. The dog's ears rise. Eleanor stops in the road. Perhaps she expects the sound to pull her backward. It does not. The oak gate opens after you knock. Mother Beatrice waits inside. She looks older than you remember, though perhaps everyone does after a long winter. Eleanor steps through. The courtyard is almost unchanged. Chickens scratch near the lean-to. A wooden bucket stands beside the well. Rosemary pushes new green growth through the infirmary garden. Rushes have been replaced inside the passage. Near the chapel, a beeswax candle burns. You remember the half-burned candle discovered months ago and the little scrap of blue thread beside it. Eleanor remembers too. She reaches beneath her sleeve. The thread is still there, faded, nearly white. Mother Beatrice notices. She says nothing. Eleanor returns the cloak. Then the two women walk slowly beneath the cloister arcade. You remain far enough away that their words blur into murmurs. Those who tell the tale never fully agree what passes between them. Some say Mother Beatrice asks Eleanor to reconsider even then. Some say she blesses her new life. Some insist neither woman speaks about Martin at all. Perhaps the truth is quieter. Perhaps they simply acknowledge that both have suffered because neither could make the other's choice. Before leaving, Eleanor enters the chapel. She kneels where she once prayed each day. There is no bundle beside her now, no stolen key, no plan waiting beneath her cloak. only stillness. When she rises, she touches the edge of the worn psalter left on its shelf. Martin's letter is no longer hidden inside it. She carries that with her. Outside the gate, Martin waits beside 2 horses. He has obtained the better household position. It is not wealth. It is enough. Months later, after the required waiting has passed, Eleanor and Martin marry quietly in a parish church. There is coarse bread afterward, ale, smoked fish, a small meat pie, and enough honey cakes for Alginus to complain that everyone has become extravagant. The dog steals one. Some things remain reassuringly unchanged. Even now, it's hard to tell exactly what becomes of Eleanor in later years. Perhaps she lives near the bishop's town. Perhaps she keeps accounts for Martin because she reads and writes better than many householders. Perhaps the story grows in retelling until ordinary hardship becomes romance and uncertainty becomes destiny. But as you stand with her outside the little church, the truth feels smaller and warmer than legend. She has not defeated the medieval world. She has found a narrow path through it. And somewhere beyond the fields, a convent bell begins to ring. Eleanor hears it. She listens. Then she takes Martin's hand and walks on. The road grows quiet now. You no longer need to follow it very far. Evening settles over the fields, gentle and blue, and the last pale light rests along the edges of the hedges. Behind you, the village becomes only a handful of warm windows beneath dark roofs. Smoke rises slowly into the cooling air. Somewhere inside a cottage, bread is covered for morning, embers are banked beneath ash, and a wool blanket is pulled higher over tired shoulders. The dog has finally stopped wandering. He curls beside a low hearth, paws tucked beneath him, breathing softly. Martin's ink-stained papers have been put away. Eleanor's St. Leonard badge rests inside a small wooden box beside the faded blue thread and the old letter that once crossed the convent wall. Nothing needs to be decided tonight. The bells have already spoken. The doors are closed. The road can remain empty until morning. You can let the cold stone, muddy tracks, candle-lit halls, river mist, and winter fields drift farther away now, becoming softer with distance. The convent still stands beneath the night sky. Its oak gate is shut. A single beeswax candle burns near the chapel altar, steady and golden, while the sisters sleep behind thick walls and the last fire settles into red light beneath soot-dark rafters. Far beyond them, another small house rests beneath the same darkness. There is warmth there. There is quiet. There is nothing moving except the faint glow of embers and the slow shadow of branches against the wall. And as the final bell fades across the fields, you do not need to follow its sound. You can stay here in the stillness, warm beneath the blankets, while the medieval road disappears gently into the dark. Nothing more is required of you tonight. The story is finished, the candles grow dim, and the whole old world becomes quiet.